And so it's very nice to see everybody, and we're very fortunate to have County's Chief Administrative Officer, Ms. Rogers, making a presentation to us today. And that's very helpful as we are about to embark on the last 2 months of our commission tenure or existence, and as we move towards the final report. So it's very timely to have Madam CEO's presence today. And the only thing I will say is the approval of the meeting minutes. We had a bit of a technical glitch, so we may approve those by email, or we'll catch them at the next meeting. So having said that, I will officially end my welcome. And Elizabeth, if you want to set the stage a little bit for Madam CAO, that'd be great.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And welcome everyone. Over the many months that the commission has been meeting, we've been parking some issues that have come up either at the subcommittee level or through different actual contracts that have gone to council, but that sort of raise more global issues. And so we thought, and PETA and I spoke offline in preparation for this and for the Madam CAO's presentation, it would be useful for the commission to hear from our county administrative officer on some of the topics that, again, may have come up in the spring, but we kind of put them aside around the interim report, knowing that we would come back to the issues in preparation for the final report. So the presentation and discussion that we've prepared to share reflects those parked issues. There may be other things that come up in Q&A, but we wanted to start out addressing those. And worked as a team with Rose Butler and Susan Dubin to kind of think through what Madam CAO will be sharing with you today, as well as, of course, her own experience in the role here in the county. So without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to our County Administrative Officer, Stacey Rogers.
Connected through my own hotspot, not the county server. If folks are still having trouble getting in, tell them to drop back to their personal hotspots on their phone, and they should be able to get in. But the server is definitely not working.
It's okay.
Okay. Hi, Rob. We're having trouble.
I'm here. Yeah, we don't have a county server. Everything's based in the cloud, so it's also the same connection. So, okay, but yeah, I'll help you.
You know what I mean.
Have somebody come up?
You know what I mean.
Okay. No, you said you may have somebody. You may have somebody come up.
Nope, I'm good. My hotspot works. So.
Okay.
Anyway, commissioners and Mr. Chair, Elizabeth shared with me a number of the parked issues and asked that I be prepared to share some of the efforts that we made toward hotspot issues. But at the end of the day, what I'd like to say is I'd like to give a little bit of context of from where we started and where we are now on this journey toward procurement reform here in the government based on the work that the team has done. And I want to thank Carla and Rose and all of the colleagues who work in the procurement part of our continuum of service delivery, because they serve a massive organization. And when you look at some of the data, because we do a lot of benchmarking, we're woefully, as far as I'm concerned, understaffed. So Jasmine, if you want to move the slides ahead, just want you to know that we're making steady progress by analyzing our current operations, and then comparing our work to other jurisdictions and trying to move ahead in adopting procurement best practices. So this has been a difficult journey because for me, I arrived April 1st of 2019. We started turning over rocks and looking at things, and lo and behold, not even a year into the work, the pandemic hit, which really has had some significant impact. And as we've said along the way in this journey, we were flying the plane as we were building it in all aspects, addressing the pandemic, plus trying to work on a plethora of areas, which I'm really proud of the steps we've made given the circumstances by which we were working. Slide 1 just talks about the professional development schedule with respect to procurement best practices. There just wasn't a focus on procurement development for the staff. So we've moved along in getting all of our procurement staff, getting them some training. But that was an observation across the enterprise that training was not a focus for our staff, but particularly our procurement staff. You can go to the next slide, Jazz. One thing I wanted to share with you all is the procurement. This is an issue that occurred with respect to the pandemic. The same staff doing the work, understaffed in comparison to other jurisdictions. But then if you just look at the growth that occurred, a lot of it being pushed because of needing to do procurements associated with addressing the pandemic. You know, our procurement just jumped up, and the same people doing the work. And even if you look at where we are, we're just ending the first quarter of FY 2022, which ends today. We're still on pace for that same kind of astronomical growth if our procurement activities associated with things with pandemic and other things continue. So I just wanted to set that backdrop for you, and then looking at our staffing comparisons. Jasmine, we can go to slide 3. When we benchmark against other jurisdictions, and this is something that we also asked Public Works LLC to do, but benchmark with respect to those who are designated as central procurement staff, as opposed to looking within the departments, because sometimes in the departments, the people who are designated and are delegated to do procurement work aren't necessarily procurement experts. That was not their field of expertise, but they had the capability of doing some of the work. But if you just look at where we are in Baltimore County with 12 procurement employees, in terms of those who are designated, this is what their experience in the procurement work is. You can see where we are. I mean, even Howard County, if you look at our budget versus Howard's and the amount of transactions, we're well behind, in terms of number of staff and then the volume of transactions. So just wanted to set the backdrop, which I'm sure you all have seen this as well, but I didn't know how much of the data you had seen, but this is the data that we've looked at and saying, oh my goodness, we've got to make, some changes and some investments. So just want to talk a little bit about some of the transformation that we've been working on. You want to go to slide, next slide, Jasmine, which includes the work that you're doing. And we're anxiously awaiting your recommendations because from the feedback and the work that you've been working on and where Elizabeth has indicated we're headed, they align with many of the things that we know would help us. The disparity study has really helped us, and I'm really pleased that we were able to jumpstart a number of efforts since the study was initiated, and from a staffing standpoint, moving toward a more realistic staffing around our MBE, WBE, DBE program, because Carla clearly was a one-woman operation. The next thing that will help us is, from a data standpoint, is the implementation of Workday, which is slated. This is a huge undertaking because it's not only HR, we are implementing the financial module of Workday that will take us into a better platform that will allow us to enhance our outcome-based budgeting efforts and be able to, have more real-time data analytic capability. And the one that's not on here that I would say is going to help, particularly, from the compliance standpoint, is our upgrade of Prism. Prism, of course, is the monitoring and reporting software platform that the county has had for many years, but upon my arrival, I realized that county had not purchased all of the appropriate and necessary components of Prism to really do and focus on compliance and accountability on both ends, the county as well as our contractors. So I'm really pleased that we were able to get that funded. We were able to get additional staff funded for Carla, and moving ahead with some of the implementation, recommendation of the implementations from the disparity study. So we've done a lot in the midst of, if you will, managing and, addressing a pandemic. So a couple areas of interest to you all, and I know we're addressing, and I know you all have recommendations to address. The county has a $25,000, well, under $25,000 authority to procure goods and services. And I think a part of our challenge in an organization with a $4 billion budget, when you compare us to some of our sister jurisdictions, is the amount of transactions that we have to take to council over $25,000. It's difficult to get emergent things done when we only have $25,000 authority to purchase. And we do reserve the right to use our purchasing power. From a budgetary standpoint, we are very transparent with the full budget, the $4 billion budget that we operate on. That's approved by council, and then we come back to council for approval on anything over $25,000. That in itself causes for us some challenges because $25,000, $4 billion budget environment, it really kind of holds us back. So what we realized that there were issues that the staff were joining these $25,000 procurement endeavors with larger contracts, which would result in sending things upstairs that looked retroactive. I immediately noticed that, talked about it, because we did have the right to procure certain parts of services. And it is totally inappropriate for the county to submit to council a contract request that shows a date prior to even submitting it to council. So we have to fix that. And we we no longer send things upstairs, which is this request for retroactive approval, when some of the work that we've done has been done under our $25,000 authority, but the way it was being sent upstairs was just reflective of appearing that we were asking for retroactive approval. We also, Procurement and Law Office is reviewing our code and purchasing manual to develop a better way of addressing procurements like that. So we do want to acknowledge that that was problematic. And Peter, we thank you for acknowledging and recognizing and flagging some of these things. But what we're hopeful is that we can, number one, get the approval, our authority moved from $25,000 to, you know, a higher amount, so we don't have all of these challenges. The other thing that impacts us, and I don't know if you all looked at it from your perspective, but the council's summer schedule impacts some of our contracting timeframes in terms of when we can get things in and get it reviewed and get it approved, because sometimes it takes a while to get that negotiation done. But at the end of the day, for us, we want to do it right, but we want to reserve the right to use our $25,000 procurement authority and then bring things to council that may be related in scope, but are clearly different than the work we've done, and have all contracts effective based on approval by the council, or even if the dates are, you know, further out. And I do monitor that during our briefings, pre-briefings before we submit contracts upstairs. These are just some new steps that we've taken to try to address some issues. The next area that you all flagged is about contract extensions and amendments. Jasmine, you can go to the next slide. It's clear that there has been in the past just a the disparity study reflected this, and our own observation as a new administration, we've seen, you know, just the patterns of moving things forward with an extension or an amendment, but we're moving away from that just general movement forward like that. It's important to us that, first of all, that we look at our procurement needs and how procurements are put forward with the number of extensions, the timing, you know, emergency extension if things have not been done timely. And I will say to you, that is tied back to the earlier discussion about volume and workload impact. Sometimes our hands are forced because we don't have the runway to get the things done timely because it's a bottleneck. I experienced this at the state level too. So not the first time I've experienced it, but the staffing disparity, this is the first time I've ever seen a procurement team that is what I consider woke and understaffed. The other thing that we've started is vetting the pool of SPE, WBE, and MBE vendors and ensuring that that information is out there about certain procurement. Because one of the things I hear and get feedback is that people don't know what we're procuring. So in Carla's team's expansion, having forecast as other procurement, small and minority business procurement activities that say what we're anticipating doing, and having vendor days by service levels and service activities, so our agencies can learn more about what's out there, and then the vendor community can learn more about the government, the county government's needs. We're also looking closely when there's multiple contracts awarded, looking to make sure that work is allocated among the contractors and compensation in terms of equity if two contracts have been awarded for a service, and how that the decision making of who gets work off a contract, and it not being based on unavailability of contractor one. There has to be equity. So we've moved in that direction as well. Okay, Jasmine. Oh, you skipped over one. Can you go back one more? Right, snow removal. This one I know is a problematic one, and we're dealing with this right now because the way these have been done, the justification for doing this is because of the competition among the state and other jurisdictions for the service, and that has just gone through with anyone who comes forward. We look at it, we review it, and put forward a non-competitive contract request. Well, we've put a halt to that because few came through for this season, but we have to look at our need, what we're working on. We need to know how many contractors we have already who are available, and where they can service. Again, the notion of, okay, we have X amount of contractors, how can we allocate the work and the service areas like they do in Prince George's County. Director Deandra Walker has talked about this process and looking at, if we've got X amount of contractors on board, notifying them, are you available? Are you still viable? We have them on board, and then putting out a request for quotes around the service areas that we need, and advertising that so that smaller minority contractors know about it, that everybody has an opportunity as opposed to a few people who know how to get in. So this has been a big one for us. We're also looking at on-call contracts with multiple awards in the same way that I just described. On-call contractors have shared with me that they get awarded, which ties up some of their availability, but yet they never get allocations of work. So we're trying to straighten that out as well. All right, Jasmine, we can move to the next slide. The P card and healthcare consulting contract. I know this was an area that you all looked in, and we do acknowledge and look forward to your recommendations, but a lot of it, happened as a result of COVID, staffing issues and not being able to get the amendments done quickly enough. As I said before, some of these things were impacted just by sheer volume, that volume increase. But under normal circumstances, the contract would have been rebid, and we would have identified a cooperative procurement. So this one is another, I think, a result. It's not a historical pattern, but this is another example of how just the volume and the workload of getting things through, especially over the last year and a half. And then finally, the whole 902F justification piece. We definitely took a hard look at that, and you'll note we started tracking those source contract. And I'm pleased to say that we have seen a decrease in the number of sole source 902F justifications because we are now scrutinizing them at the pre-submission level. And just between 2019 and 2021, we reduced that by 100 sole source 902F justifications. We're going to continue to work on that. And here, just in FY 2022, the first quarter, we've only experienced 80 in the first quarter. So if we continue to follow that trend, we should be under the 440 where we were last year. But the next steps, we need to educate the folks in the department about how to determine if somebody's 902F the standard. There are certain things that do meet the standard, but we have to rely less on the sole source procurement and give equal access and consideration to the full contractor community. We will also, we know that some factors include efficiency studies, cost and equipment, end-of-life studies in terms of justifications, but we're focusing in on what does that mean and educating the individuals in departments who are responsible for these purchases, so they do not just default to 902F. And then last, but of course not least, for all of us, the on-call contracting report from the auditors, we agree with finding, and we began to implement changes. You know, we developed on-call contractor policies. From a capital improvement project standpoint, work assignments are now more competitively procured, and we're awarding the build and design, construction, and trade professional services. This whole area, and I know Ms. Walker is definitely zeroing in on her work on the Department of Public Works and Transportation. We now notify the council of the cost of all capital improvement projects awarded to on-call contractors that exceed 20% of the original quote. We're doing some work there, but we know this is an area that we also look forward to your recommendations on this area. But again, a major area of reform for us. And while we've done a lot, we know we have a lot to do, but I will say, I want to commend the county team for pushing the envelope and trying to move forward with our reform efforts. So I'm sure with your recommendations, we'll have some more really good things to consider and help us to move forward with having a world-class procurement process that follows best practices, that we will be a best practice jurisdiction in the area of procurement when it's all said and done, and it's time for us to turn out the lights when our administration's work is done. Mr. Chair, I will be there and entertain any questions you all may have.
Thank you. That was very helpful. And Jasmine has emailed all of us a copy of all the slides. And so let me open it up to questions.
I see
Mr.
one.
Phelps, do you have a question? I'm sorry, go ahead. Just go ahead.
Yes, Commissioner Phillips, one of the things we're working on, again, a major project in terms of procurement reform, is putting words on paper. And codifying within, from the policy and practice standpoint, the policy and educating individuals on the policy. For example, on the small and minority business pieces, we are working with Dr. Ramsey to redo some of our manuals and redo the documents and SOPs, and then for DBE, getting our infrastructure in place, because we do not have our DBE program in place the way it should be, and we do not want to run the risk of being cited by the U.S. Department of Transportation for failure to meet the guidelines around the DBE program. We have not moved forward yet with any code changes, and we're hopeful that after we get your recommendations and we get Public Works LLC's recommendations, if there are code changes that need to go forward, by all means, we will do that. We will review them, take into consideration, because the team will tell you, my standpoint in management is we always have to work within our authority. We have to self-monitor and be accountable, and we have to be transparent, but we have to have words on paper, because when somebody asks you, how did you come to this decision, or why are you doing it a certain way, we should be able to point to our document that tell us that. But unfortunately, some of the documents here in the county are decades old. Code that has not been reviewed or updated in certain parts of the operating decade.
Other questions? Yes, Commissioner Richkus.
Thank you, Phil, and thank you very much. The presentation really dug into a lot of issues that we also addressed in our interim report, Madam CAO, and I salute you for taking them head on. I've said to, I'm sure, members of this group, as well as to individual members of the county staff, that I continue to be amazed at how much they accomplish given the climate of the coronavirus and given what I know are strapped resources in many of the agencies in the county. So kudos to the staff for all that they do. I really appreciate you coming and talking to us today. I do have one question, not about your presentation, but when I listened to the Public Works LLC presentation to the school board, their contract manager indicated that the general government side of the audit would be ready in mid-October. What is the current status of that? Because we're all anxious to be able to take advantage of whatever is included. The school one was over 700 pages, so I imagine we're going to have a lot of reading to do.
Yeah, I will defer to Elizabeth, because that's her project. We try to divide the widgets, if you will. From a wagon wheel, this is what's funny, from a wagon wheel perspective, what comes out of Blue Ribbon Commission and these studies and things ends up on the operation team side for implementation. And so Elizabeth and I work hand in hand on a number of issues, but she has been the driving force on the Public Works LLC work, so she could give a guide. And I'll tell you, I'm excited. I can't wait to see both the reports, because we need that input to further guide our reform efforts on a number of things, but particularly procurement. And if I know this is a selfless plea, but if there's recommendation around that threshold in terms of spending authority for general government, $25,000 is just beyond my comprehension in a $4 billion budget that gets approved. That gets approved when the council passes a budget, but to still operate like we're a small little jurisdiction, it really ties our hands and takes up so much time.
That recommendation is already factored in, so you have our support on that.
I'm so glad that I know the procurement staff will just be bowing down because it's hard to get all that stuff through. So Elizabeth.
Oh, yes, yes.
on
So,
the timing.
So as it may have been clear throughout, the BCPS review was sort of on a separate track and was completed by a completely different team. And it was frankly from a management perspective almost better that came first because it kind of got done. And now we're completing the Baltimore County government review. I know there's at least one more meeting next week on some of the content, but I've also seen some draft versions of parts of it. So I do expect it will be out in October. I don't want to hold myself till the 15th. I would say too, just to this group, one of the reasons that it's a little slower track is we insisted that they bring in additional expertise to look at our Department of Public Works and Transportation, which then indeed produced some much more robust recommendations across the board for that department. So the delay, if you will, it was well worth it because we actually have, which Madam CAO will see in a few days, a much more in-depth set of recommendations for one of our largest and most important and well-funded departments. So it will be out in time for this group to review before your final report. And Beth Semick, who worked with me on this project, who I believe is on the call, will be able to assist in kind of chunking out what you might want to review in short order. But we need another few weeks to get that turned around to you.
And the other thing I'll say, they do have to come to me and vet the recommendations after they've talked to the department. And there have been a couple times where we've said, I think we need to have a little further conversation because there's some things we're working on already that this counter, the work we've invested, this is counter to where we're going. And can we have conversations? So it's been a joint project. So I will say, my reviews have contributed a little bit to the timeline too. Mm-hmm. But we want a good product. I tell the CEO all the time, sometimes you got to go slow to go fast, because if you go fast, you'll miss opportunities to be the best.
Other questions from the commissioners? I've got one, and CEO, picking up on some comments that were made about the interim report. I'm just curious the extent to which there's been any discussion about the interim report and any thoughts or reactions to recommendations in there, because we actually had a number of extensive recommendations, including as to need for hiring. We've got a really good procurement purchasing staff, but it's we're way behind other jurisdictions. But I'm just wondering if there's been any general reaction to the interim report that you can share.
Unfortunately, we haven't been able, I did my first read, but we haven't been able to convene the teams and caucus. And I'll tell you why. No one anticipated the impact of the Delta variant. Mm-hmm. We thought we were looking in the rearview mirror on the pandemic. But I tell you, when we had to reverse gears, pull back and reinstitute masking, and now this big challenge of, I'm not trying to make excuses, but I just want you to know what sucks up all the time, making all these policy decisions around implementation of a mandatory vaccination program for those who refuse to be vaccinated, a mandatory testing program. Trying to work out the implementation and logistics of that has been just a workload on top of the workload. Mm-hmm. From the recommendations, we do have to have that huddle. We have planned to have the huddle on the interim report once they're back vacation in early September. But that's when all of Delta variant stuff broke out. But I will say to you, from my read, very, very excited and, supportive of where you're going. But we will try to get that huddle we wanted to have with the key players and get some feedback to Elizabeth ASAP so you have it. But I feel very good about the direction that the recommendations are going. Then I also hope that some of the recommendations, the pieces that are coming out of Public Works LLC that tie, because there's some nuances between the two efforts that I think are complementary and may inform the final version of your report. And your final report is slated for
November 30.
November 3rd.
Right.
I want to add, I'm not sure it's everyone is aware, but I know that the Jen Iosa, our Chief Sustainability Officer, sort of came in just as that report was being completed, and I know sent a review and suggestions, and I know Dan and the subcommittee have responded. So I think that piece has been sort of the right individuals have coalesced from the county side around that. So I think I will take responsibility to reschedule that huddle, if you will, so that we get you some informal feedback.
Right.
If I don't know that we'll have any more, as the CAO said, we're on the right track here, but let's just make sure we're not missing anything.
Right. We really wanted to, that's a step that we take with all of the commission recommendations or the work groups that come up. We take that step to come back and huddle and give feedback. So I don't want to miss that step because it's been very valuable for team members to come together. But on the preliminary things, my read, I'm like, yes, we're not crazy over here in terms of what we've been observing and needing to say and needing to make the investment if we're going to be a best practice jurisdiction when it comes to procurement. Between the disparity study and Blue Ribbon Commission report and the sub pieces out of the lot of things that happen right closely together is going to give us our direction for the rest of this term. And I'm planning for success for another 4 years because we know if granted that second term, we have 5 good years on the implementation side. So when we leave, we can say we are a best practice jurisdiction when it comes to procurement, trash, number of things.
I do want to piggyback 1 minute because I know the final report of this commission will include those best practices that were gathered through the experts panel, which was thank you to PETA and others who got names and pulled people together, and that lives on. And I know there's been some analysis of materials we received, and I think the value add from that session alone in the final report is going to be tremendous. So that's thank you from the county to the commission for putting that on your agenda.
Well, PETA and her subcommittee deserve all the credit for pulling that excellent presentation together. And I was just going to say, Madam CEO, there will be a robust section on best practices, as well as some other things that we didn't reach on in the interim report. But if there is the opportunity to huddle and we can get feedback on the earlier side, we'll be certain to take that into account, and it would be helpful to us to be sure we've gotten things covered. We've tried to be thorough, and I think we have been. But anyway, we'll wait to hear from you on that.
It's on our radar. It's definitely on our radar. We're just prayerful that we can get between Monday and October 15th, we can get this first phase of our vaccination, mandatory vaccination piece, which is the confirmation of who is vaccinated, done. That'll take a lot of pressure when we can get that in, but we will work with Elizabeth to make that happen because we had planned to do that, but just couldn't fit it in.
Understood. Thank you. Any other questions? Yes, Peter.
I just wanted to acknowledge that the best practices panel could not have happened without Scott Phillips and Sheila Dixon as my partners in crime. So thank you.
Absolutely. And I was pleased to see one of my national board members share in that activity as well.
It's all of our subcommittees are excellent, in my humble opinion.
Absolutely.
So great. Any other questions, comments before we thank Madam CEO for a presentation and move on to a few minutes of commission business? Anything else from anybody? All right, Madam CEO, thank you so much for your time and your presentation. We appreciate it. Look forward to you all having your huddle in a timely fashion and hearing from you. And you'll certainly have our final report November 30.
Absolutely. And thank you all. I can't express enough how important it is to us to have input. The CE has instilled in us that to have the broadest intellectual, conversations about things to make sure that we're not, just so close to it that that's all it is. And these kinds of activities really do help us. So I look forward to getting all the recommendations and working with the team from an implementation and a funding standpoint, because everything we accept, we then need to go back and look at, okay, how do we fund it? So budget development for FY23 is coming up. So this is perfect timing to get the recommendations. And thank you all very much for having me today.
Sure. But thank you for being here, and we'll look forward to the procurement line items in the budget. So coming up, thank you.
Indeed.
All right.
Thank you.
Let's move to commission business on the agenda. And I think we've already had the bit of a update on the efficiency audit final report. Elizabeth, is there anything else you wanted to add beyond what's already been said?
No, and I think you've kind of got a sense that there's a little bit more review that the CAO is scheduled to do, in fact, and it does relate to that DPWT, which for better or worse, we imported much more experienced subject matter experts, particularly as we added transportation to that department. So I'm pleased with the thoroughness of the new recommendations, but it did set us back. Having said that, I don't believe that the more general procurement recommendations have changed all that much. So if the commission would like to see some final parts of the report piecemeal, that might be possible. I'm just realizing that, but definitely the DPWT section is not quite ready for prime time, but will be within 2 weeks, I'm sure.
Well, I would say to the extent that we can get the procurement relevant portions piecemeal or stamped in draft, it would be helpful to have it, because I know we've all been focused on not being super rushed in the preparation of the final report. So there's lots of opportunity for input and editing and review. And so if that's a possibility, that would be, I think that would be helpful. So we'll wait to hear from you on that. Yes, Peter.
I just wanted to add, since we're talking about DPWT, Elizabeth, it probably did not fall into your reading pile, but we did have a recommendation from Steve in our work towards the final report, that the people in engineering and construction who are involved in procurement should be transferred, or the county should consider transferring them to the procurement division, so that there would be cross training, opportunities for promotion and better coordination of all of the procurement functions. Now, that would be certainly a dramatic change for the agency, given, decades of past practices. But I thought it was interesting that the recommendation came from Steve.
Mhm. I was thinking of the one I did see about the snow removal contract issue, so I don't know subcommittee wise how those are gonna flow. But, I assume they'll be considered for the final report. And I don't think that's too outside the box by any measure.
Well, I think what we have is an opportunity to make recommendations for what we, as a commission, believe are the necessary improvements. And because what we will present, and I understand there are budgeting and other practical things that have to occur, but I think this is a pretty practical group here. So that kind of recommendation, and again, coming from Steve, given his background, is significant. So we'll roll all that into the draft that we can all have to look at, to discuss, and the like. So thanks for bringing that up, Peter. All right.
Andrew?
Yes, I'm sorry. Commissioner Chambers, nice to see you. Please go ahead.
In reference to final reports, I do know that we have to, the small business or MWBE committee has some changes. I've sent some information to the committee. I think it was earlier this month, in response to some of the concerns Peter had in reference to the recommendations, and said, here's what we have, here are options. I'm waiting to hear back from our subcommittee regarding how we're going to move that. Carla Tucker is on the line. There has been there was another issue that has come up in reference to what some of her responsibilities are that are not necessarily a MWBE function, but she's been given it. So we've worked through that one, and I have yet to make that recommendation. So what we are finding is that there are constant changes or additions of responsibility to Carla's like, oh yeah, I got this responsibility. Oh yeah, and I forgot. I got this, because it's like when you don't know who to give it to, give it to Carla Tucker. And I think as she's coming up with, oh, I have to do this and I have to do that, and it's like, yeah, I got to do that. They didn't, so we're still trying to. We know that there's some additional issues that we've been given, and now it's how to best talk about it. And so unfortunately they're immediate because she's dealing with it, and I'm literally getting texts from her late at night as to, okay, how do we want to make this recommendation, because we want to make recommendations that work for her department. So just know that was one of the reasons why we haven't given an updated report. Number two, to my committee, I need your input. I can't do this with just me and one other person. One of the latest thing is Peter knows about it. They've got Carla doing, what is it? Oh God, Carla, because I got a whole bunch of stuff in my head, but about engineer estimates. If it's over the engineer price, she's got to look at it, and it's like, nope, that's not her. That's procurement, DPW. So, Scott, you might want to chime in on it. I saw you popped your photo. So there's just we're still getting. Carla's department's doing this. It's not even her department. It's Carla. She's doing A, B, C, D, E, F, G, X, Y, Z, double A, double B, double C. I mean, it's crazy. So, that's where we are. So,
Understood.
team, I need your reply emails, please. Thank you. I know we're all busy, but I do want to be able to update our report. Thank you.
Or we could just have a recommendation that says somebody's got to do it. So just here's Carla's mobile number and her email address, and we're not going to do that. We're not going to do that.
Wait a
Ms.
minute,
Tucker.
which Carla, me or Tucker?
But the two of you. Appreciate that, and I think what would be helpful is we set a deadline, and then all the subcommittees, and we've gotten a number of reports already. And I've talked to Elizabeth and Jasmine about this. I think we ought to just drop them into a draft final report. There'll be some other things, obviously, that'll have to go into that final report, but they have a document we can all start working from, and have a meeting to discuss the draft and the like. So we ought to figure out when, well, let's see, our next meeting is scheduled for October 14. It doesn't sound like we'll have the, well, maybe we'll have the efficiency study procurement sections by then. But I'm wondering if we might not want to move that meeting back a week. And the idea being also that we will have to commission members by mid-October a very initial draft of the final report that we can also discuss on say on the 21st or whatever other date in the month we want to do that. But I really want to get the writing process going. I know that Steve and Pete have worked up something on fleet management. If I'm leaving a subcommittee member out, I apologize. But I know that Steve has sent that. There was also the section that Peter mentioned that Steve has done. We've got best practices. And Carl, I know that you and Pete have been conversing, and we'll have to talk about that. I know Dan has some thoughts about the healthcare piece and the like. So I don't want to get too late into October, but I want to be sure whatever the next meeting we have is productive. And I do think we have to start focusing on the final report. And anyway, go ahead. Yes.
I just want to say, since we have everybody on the call, some of the stuff that affects us, it's tied to the work that Peter has done. So Peter, if I can get you, Scott, and Peter, possibly Sheila, if we can huddle, because as Peter, as you know, that issue that came up was kind of like a linkage, and you said, well, what we've done, will that help? And Carla Tucker said yes. So I think that we have a couple of joint pieces, so that I can say this relates to section what have you on Peter's report, so that it matches up. So if the 3-4 of us, maybe 5 of us, can find a date prior to October 14th where we can huddle, hopefully for no more than an hour, to do those linkages, that would be helpful. Thank you. I appreciate that.
So what's everybody's thought? Should we leave the meeting in on the 14th? Shall we move it back a bit? What's everybody's view?
I would prefer not to push it back any further.
Okay. Yeah, I'm perfectly fine with leaving it the 14th.
I agree, because time is so short.
Yeah. And then in terms of so the subcommittees need to confer and huddle. It's already, tomorrow's the first day of October. I'm just thinking in terms of when it's realistic to think about having a draft final report. And Elizabeth, is that after the 14th?
In terms of Public Works LLC or yours?
Well, in terms of ours, but again, I know there's going to be some overlap with Public Works, and it really would be helpful if we could see the piecemeal sections, just because with all due respect to them, I want to be sure that
Yes,
the commission has things covered.
I'm gonna ask Beth to chime in. I actually think we can share piecemeal pieces by then. They will not, in other words, it won't be necessarily like the full comprehensive formatting. The procurement concepts primarily are standalone in the realm of what Bob Furman presented, but I'm thinking there are a few related in OIT and then also DPWT. So Beth would have to do a collection of those and share them, which is not a problem. It's really just, are they going to be in the most final format? Let's call it around the 11th or 12th. And we talked to the consultant this morning. Beth, do you have a sense that that's likely by then?
I think we can make that happen, especially if we gather those and request that those get finalized. That should not really be a problem.
Okay. So
So-
let's
so,
put
Greg,
that
I
on the
wanna make
to-do
sure I'm
list.
clear. Are you talking about having a draft final by our meeting on the 14th?
Well, here's
That-
what I'm, yeah, I had, that was one of the questions, Scott, but just in listening, I'm wondering, and Peter, I saw your hand up, let me just finish the thought and then I'll ask you to go forward. What I'm wondering is, let's keep our meeting on the 14th. Let's get the piecemeal efficiency procurement aspects distributed to the whole commission in advance of the 14th. Let's look to have a week before the 15th, if that will give the subcommittees time, or at least several days before. I can set an arbitrary date, but if we can agree on one, I'd prefer that all the subcommittees share all of their reports if it hasn't occurred yet, so that on the 14th, we can look at the efficiency study parts of it, have discussions about each of the subcommittees proposed sections or any tweaks or changes to the particular subcommittees or anybody's interim report recommendations. And then from that, have a draft final report prepared. And then in the latter part of October, if this group thinks it's sufficient to do it this way, have a meeting to discuss anything further, or we could be sharing editing, or we could have a smaller, we could have an editing subcommittee, do an initial run through to put things in the same voice all the way through and the like. Why don't we do it that way? So on the 14th, we'll get, let's hear what Peter has to say, because she probably has a better idea. Go ahead.
Well, I'm not sure it's a better idea or even a different idea, but you have gone through, Phil, what you have received so far, what has been turned in so far. For my purposes, I'd like to have it all put together, no matter, how it mismatches, et cetera, but just thrown into a single document. So then it's going to be more obvious where holes or interrelationships are once we see it all together, as opposed to looking at it piecemeal. So even by the 15th or by next week, theoretically, if there was staff resources to do that, just take what has been submitted already toward the final report and just pull it into one document.
Okay, that's a great idea. So going back now to the MBE Small Business Subcommittee, when do you guys think you can huddle? Or do you have something you'd like to put together that we can send to Elizabeth and Jasmine to put into the single discussion document that Peter's suggesting?
We're not ready to submit another document because we haven't added anything. We just made that one correction.
Yes.
I'm honest, Mr. Phillips, I know your schedule is crazy. So I'm gonna lean to you to tell us what you have, because your input, you've got that subject matter expertise on both sides of the house. So I need you, and then Peter can chime in, and Peter and I can chime in, and maybe hopefully Sheila can't. But these are some specific things that I really need my subject matter experts to weigh in on. So that's why I'm saying I need Mr. Phillips to tell me what his crazy schedule, where there's a 20-minute window.
Yeah. So let's do this, Carla. I don't know what your schedule is on Tuesday. Perhaps we can look at Tuesday and spend some time, focus time.
That works for me. Peter, how are you? And Peter, how are you?
I'm looking.
And I really appreciate this.
That's fine.
And I'm wide open. So, Peter, between you and Scott, what you guys looking
On
like?
Tuesday, that's Tuesday, October 5th, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, anytime after 9 o'clock a.m., I'm fine.
And I'm the same.
So how does 10 o'clock sound? Is that okay?
Sounds
That's fine.
wonderful.
I'll send out a meeting
Fine,
appointment.
I'll
I
get
appreciate
hungry.
that you all, and I'll also resend the email with the responses that I have around Peter's questions and concerns. And the issue that came up yesterday, Peter, you're not aware of it, but Scott and Peter are.
Yeah.
So that because it's, in other words, we're adding and modifying a couple of things. And I think we can deal with, at least I think it's those two issues, maybe one other, will be okay.
Okay,
Thank you.
great. No, thank you all for that. So Elizabeth and
Carla,
Jasmine,
Are you sending
sorry.
out a calendar invite then?
Oh, I want to just clarify two things. So when I initially said piecemeal, I was talking about the Public Works Efficiency Report, and that we were gonna
Right.
pull those out of the full report, which is still draft, and present you with the pieces related to procurement.
Yes,
And that was my use of the term. When it comes to the work of this commission and the final report, knowing what we have on our plates in the county, which also has to do with expenditure of the ARP money. I'm looking, Jasmine's texting me. So we could pull something together to share with you that third week of October, which I kind of think is where we're tracking. If the subcommittees finish their work, and I think sustainability has actually, but if
Yeah.
each subcommittee can send us, even if you emailed it before, because I recall some updates from Carla, but now I'm hearing there might be more. Like if you could send us your final set of suggestions, revisions by a date we certain, then we can pull together a readable document, which means we may need an extra meeting after the 14th. Sounds like the 14th may focus on the public works efficiency stuff, but we will not be able to pull together the work of the subcommittees unless it's literally just, putting them in one document with no editing. I suppose we could do that by,
I think that would be helpful. I wouldn't worry
Is that
about
all
trying
it-
to make it look. Yeah, just so everything's together, it's, each subsection, each subcommittee has their section is titled, page numbers at the bottom, and just in terms of being able to have a discussion about it. I think that would be
Okay.
helpful. And then the work of putting it in and making it look nice to go to go into the final report format. There'll still be some more work to be done. But that way on the 14th, we can talk about the public work excerpts, and we understand those will be separate. And then what
Okay.
I'm calling a conversation document. Yeah.
If it's really, and again, that's easy. I mean, to the extent each subcommittee say next, to be realistic, I'm looking at a calendar, by next Friday, the 8th. Well, I would say by next Friday, the 8th, send
Yep.
us each subcommittee's complete compilation. Doesn't have to be pretty, and then we will at least put them into one document so that we send back out essentially a cut and paste of all the subcommittees, and that way
Exactly.
you can review it and it can be talked about on the 14th. That's doable.
Yeah, the other thing I would say, Elizabeth, if you and Jasmine get backed up, if somebody sends if I get copied on everything, I can have my office put together a Word document and then just put subheadings on and put everything in the same font and distribute that with a draft stamp on it. I mean, if that will save you all some time, we can certainly do that. But let's do plan on, and I'll send an email to everybody. But let's do plan on October 8th as the date to have those submitted
Mhm.
to Elizabeth, Jasmine, and me, and then
We'll figure it out.
we'll get it turned around quickly. And I would say people should feel free to share it with others on the commission too. You don't have to wait for the one pulled together discussion document, but we will do that. And let's do that, and we'll discuss that on the 14th, and then whatever is whatever we have from Public Works. And then I guess the last thing on the commission business is just will we have by the 14th the results of the
Oh, yeah.
revised, or not revised, but the redone or reissued internal survey by then?
Jasmine, did we get some feedback from OIT? I think we did.
On the survey, yes, I'm working with Beth to get that out hopefully by the end of this week to all the Advantage users. And so it'll be open about a week, and then we can turn around the results to everyone.
Okay, because I really would
So
like us
do you
to have
think
those
we can have
results
the
by the
results?
14th. Yeah.
By the 14th, yeah. That should be, if tomorrow's October 1, that should be doable. Because the worst thing is giving people too much time to fill out a survey. And this is a select group, as we agreed, will have more of an interest in this topic. Okay.
All right, well,
I have a quick
Well-
question.
sure, fire away.
The input committee the public input committee that we had, and we only had one comment. How are we managing/handling that comment from the one person, or we just gonna let it ride? It's noted in the books and that's it.
Well, my sense, and obviously it depends on what others think, but I'll just throw my 2 cents. And we got the information. We will discuss it and consider it. I think it's like any other information we receive. I think it's up to the commission to decide what weight to be given to it. And we certainly appreciated having the input, but I don't know that it was, I'll just leave it at that. Others may have different thoughts.
Given the fact that we
So
just
the
had,
reason why I asked is because the issue around disability and adding it, all of that. And while and she was trying to take it back to what the state said, and we all know what it is. So my question for asking was, is there going to be a report, class, readout, whatever, on the input committee and what she said? And if it is where it becomes written, are we going to have a response to it? I think that's really more of my question.
Yeah, I have a response, but go ahead, Scott. Did you want to say something?
no, I was just saying, given the fact that the input was limited, and I do think that it's a fair issue that was raised, but the fact that the input was limited, I don't know that we need to specifically address that in our report. That would be my perspective on that. If there is a mention, then there is a mention, but I don't think that we need to go into any great detail, just given the limited input that we have.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And that's something we could talk about on the 14th with a larger group. And I'm glad you brought the point up, Carla. But I do think if we can decide if we want to mention it or not. But I don't think we have to have something formal. Just
it's not so much to mention it, but just to have a ready response should something. That's all. It's just to say that it's noted. I don't want to open up a can of worms. And thank you, Scott. You're right. We don't need to give it any more life. I just wanted to close the loop one, and so that no one could ever say we didn't address
Sure.
it or we don't have a ready response, even if it's just in writing. That's all.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, and I think let's put that on the agenda for the 14th. Yes, Peter?
I was wondering if we had any feedback as to why we didn't have more speakers. I haven't heard any.
It means we don't.
I mean,
we canvassed the same lists that they were sent the surveys, in addition to the other presidents of organizations that you all shared with us.
Mhm.
I would be inclined to think that maybe vendors or potential vendors would not want to go on the record with a complaint against the county. I think, with the procurement process, people would rather have off the record conversations. That's my assumption, but I haven't received any feedback, not even to the commission email, saying any reason or one way or the other why people did or did not sign up.
So we didn't have any complaints about they couldn't get on or they couldn't access the meeting.
Yeah, no, everyone that registered, pretty much like most people that registered, they signed on because I was able to see their emails and all of that.
Thanks.
We did have other people lined up to speak, which was a great idea, but only 2 people posted out of the 4. So one of the people I know, so I will certainly inquire of him. My guess is probably had something come up with a client, wasn't able to.
I think he was sick.
Okay. So, but I had the same reaction Peter did, to be sure, with all due respect to WebEx, that it wasn't a problem signing in, because that would be.
How many people did we have on there, Jasmine?
I think we had 5 or 6, 8 or 10 non-commission or county people.
That's what I thought. It was kind of low. But is that the number of people who registered or just that showed up? How many people registered?
We might have had about 20, 25 register. So that's actually a pretty good flake rate for registration versus attendees. So
I was just wondering, I put it in the chat if it was the time of day, because you have a lot of vendors that are still working, whether they're on site or what have you. And, but I don't know.
We should report those numbers, though.
Yes.
We had a meeting, this many people registered, this many people, whatever. Thank you.
I mean, I think about the times we have sort of the most robust participation, and it's typically when people are upset, or when it's novel. Like the county executives town halls are always very well attended. It's about the budget, it's pocketbook and community issues. And the first go around, they were novel, although we've kept the numbers up. I think this might be something where the vendor community, I don't know why they didn't post, and I know there's just been discussion of why, but I think the general public doesn't realize how this affects them. I mean, there's no organizing group to say, here's why you should care, and they should care. I deeply believe that, but I don't think we really had that sort of advocacy. There's no structure that then would feed people to a conversation. That's just my 2 cents on this.
Yeah, no, procurement is not a glamour subject.
I beg your pardon.
I would say that I would say, yeah. Bill, you live your life in this stuff, right? You kind of work with this, so it's very glamorous stuff. But no, I would say that I think.
Come on.
I think that we have to own some of this. We may have been a little late getting the notices to the advocacy groups, right? So, and now with people not having physical meetings to share information like this, it gets a little difficult to stir up membership to participate in an event like our best practices, or no, I'm sorry, our feedback session. So that would be, we would do something like this again, which this commission won't, but I would encourage if the county were to do something like this again, if you're going to get it out to the advocacy groups, you probably need to get it out a little sooner, and then do some socialization by having conversations with those advocacy groups to make sure they understand the importance. But we're on a timeline and we got to keep moving.
Well, I would like to add that one thing we could do as part of the report and the report rollout is, when we post it on our website and it's released, and it'll be released with the press release, I expect, because this was a blue ribbon commission, that, it gets shared with groups, and that we say we still have this email address. I mean, if there's feedback on the report, it won't go in the report, but it is a way to continue to get interest in the issues that are part of the final recommendation. Because I can tell you, from the county executive on down, every work group we've had, the budget commission, we use those documents. We absolutely track whether we're fulfilling them, what happens, and we will report back to you all as well after the commission is formally over. But engaging the public around the issue, the report itself can become the next tool to do that, and just think about possibly a recommendation. I just wanted to put that out there.
It's good.
Thank you. All right, well, I'm going to have to give some careful thought tonight to procurement not being glamorous. So I got to get my head around that one. But that being said, anything else for the general order? Let me just, if I may, let me just recap. So we will meet on October 14, and at that meeting, we'll figure out when else we might need to meet in the latter part of October with a draft final report to look at for that latter October meeting. We're going to ask the subcommittees by the 8th of October to have their submissions of any changes to the interim report sections, additions, suggestions, questions for the whole group to consider, to have those into Jasmine, Elizabeth. If you would also copy me, that'd be fine. Jasmine, Elizabeth, if you need my office to just pull that together and get a document distributed, we're happy to do that. And then we'll discuss that on the 14th, and we'll also look somewhere the 10th, 11th, 12th of October for whatever, just to use the adjective we've been using, piecemeal portions of the efficiency survey that have to do with procurement, so we can be talking about those on the 14th as well. I think that covers it. Yes, Pete.
For those commissioners that weren't here today to listen to all this, are you going to summarize, put an email out to summarize what you just said so that everybody's aware of it?
Sure, I will. I will do that, Pete, absolutely. Okay, I don't have anything further. Again, anything else for the good of the order? With that, I will say, as I always do, because it always is a pleasure to be with you and to see all of you. And thank you for your participation. It's a pleasure to serve with you, and see everybody on the 14th. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you. See you.